Before he died suddenly in a Russian prison last month, opposition leader Alexei Navalny had urged his supporters, had urged people who oppose Vladimir Putin, had urged them to turn up at the polls this past weekend for the Russian presidential election, even though the outcome of that election is a foregone conclusion. Protesting may be illegal in Russia. Being an actual opposition figure to Vladimir Putin may be illegal, maybe fatally illegal in Russia. But Putin does still like to make it look like the country still has elections. So Navalny said, basically, take advantage of that. Show up to vote all at once. Everybody show up at noon on Sunday specifically. And that will be the way we register our opposition to the Putin regime. And this Sunday, yesterday, people did it. Polling places that moments before had been empty, suddenly at noon yesterday had lines down the block. Those lines in Russia were inspiring, impressive in terms of what people are willing to do, the risks people are willing to take to show their independence, to show their opposition. But of course, it was ultimately futile. That Russia even held a vote this weekend is a farce. Everybody knew the outcome the moment Putin announced he would run for a fifth term. He's president for life. This is the way it goes. It's an autocracy that pretends it is still a democracy, right? You make it look like there's an election, but there's no suspense because they don't really let anybody run against you. And the vote itself does not matter. The results of the election have nothing to do with the actual preference and actual behavior of the voters. When you start doing that, when you start turning elections into these Potemkin affairs, it doesn't really matter if you've done anything formal to announce or mark your transition into something other than a democracy. Once you have a situation where the vote in advance is determined to be irrelevant, so that whatever happens, whatever the voters do, there's only one possible result. Once you have that, you're kind of there, right? You are no longer in a real democracy. You may remember that after Election Day in 2020, when Joe Biden had decisively won the state of Michigan by over 150,000 votes, you might remember two Republican officials briefly refused to certify those election results in largely Democratic counties. Then Republicans in one county in Georgia, another state Joe Biden won, they also refused to certify election results in part of that state as well. That county's refusal to certify the results was used as evidence in a draft executive order Trump never issued, an order that would have commanded the seizing of voting machines across the country as a prelude to the military running some sort of redo of the whole election because something had gone wrong the first time around and it appeared that Trump didn't win. Those local attempts at invalidating election results in 2020, those were effectively improvised responses to Trump losing that election. This next time around in 2024, elections officials, Republican election officials, seem like they are more planning it out in advance this time. This is the headline on new reporting published today in Rolling Stone. Quote, potential 2024 chaos. Election deniers refusing to certify results. Quote, in at least 15 instances since November 2020, local Republican officials in 8 different states have refused to certify election results. If local election officials nationwide decide en masse to refuse to certify election results this year, it could slow certification of statewide tallies crucial to determining the next president. It could create chaos, as well as a false basis for trying to find some way to challenge the outcome of the November election. Local Republican elections officials in some of these cases over the last few years have demanded audits and hand recounts. And then even when all the audits and recounts show the same results, they've still refused to certify the election. Because it's not about what the voters have actually voted for. It's about setting up a system that can deliver only one possible result. This is the way it works in many parts of the world. It has not been the way it works here. They're trying to change that. And we've got more on that story next. Stay with us. At Rolling Stone today, reporter Justin Glaw reports on election officials across the country in Republican-controlled states and counties who, since the 2020 election, have refused to certify election results. They have demanded things like hand recounts. They have demanded that results simply not be certified. Glaw describes it as what appears to be a sort of constellation of local local events, but ones that pose a potential real challenge for 2024, heading into what is certainly going to be a contested election in the presidential race and potentially other levels. Also troubling because it appears that some of these, what appear to be separate and discordant efforts, may be linked, at least by sort of perpetrators of these events who are taking funding from the same sorts of people, attending the same sorts of conferences, and ascribing themselves to the same conspiracy theories about elections being fraudulent. Joining us now is Justin Glaw, who's reported this piece for Rolling Stone. He's also the author of American Doom, which is a newsletter on Substack. Mr. Glaw, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
So how much commonality is between the different types of instances that you found, 15 different instances you reported since 2020, in which local Republican officials have refused to certify election results?
Well, the commonality is that they're not based in reality. They're carried out by people who believe lies and conspiracy theories about widespread election fraud that just doesn't exist.
In terms of where this is coming from, is it a centrally organized effort? I mean, you did describe some sort of links and sort of network patterns between these groups. They seem to, in some cases, be funded by the same sorts of entities and attending the same sorts of conferences, of subscribing to the same sorts of sources of information. But are they effectively working together to try to seed doubts about 2024?
Only in that they are reading and absorbing the same type of materials about, election fraud and conspiracies as a lot of other Americans are. So, it's sort of like decentralized coordination, I guess, where, they're involved in these networks. They're reading this stuff. They're listening to what Trump says about it, and they're believing it.
One of the experts that you cite in your piece from the Brennan Center says part of the strategy is to create chaos and to create a false basis for trying to find some way to challenge the outcome. Is part of the idea here, part of the threat here, that you can create smoke for any number of reasons that aren't, as you say, based in reality. But if you create enough smoke, you can convince people that there is a fire. You can use disparate false claims of irregularities to create a sense that there must be something wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't be hearing about all of these local controversies.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And I think you can look to that never issued executive order that you talked about earlier about seizing voting machines, where they mentioned one of these instances of refusing to certify as evidence of the sort of phenomenon of creating smoke and then saying that there's a fire. And, so they did that in last time around and said, well, they refused to certify in Coffee County, therefore there's fraud. Let's seize the voting machines.
Justin Glaw, reporter for Rolling Stone. Again, this piece is called Potential 2024 Chaos, Election Deniers Refusing to Certify Results. I feel like you've done a really good job of putting the pins on the map here that are going to end up being really important over these next 8 months as we see this inevitably spread. Justin, thanks for your reporting.